Hello and welcome everyone to Ananke's Festival of Literature. I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome Francesco Verso. Welcome, Francesco.
Hi, Sabine. Thank you very much for the invitation.
A little bit about Francesco. Francesco Verso is a multiple award science fiction writer, award-winning science fiction writer and editor, three Europe Awards, two Urania Awards, two Italy Awards, one Galaxy Award, and one Marco Polo Award for the promotion of Chinese science fiction. He has published, if you can pronounce Francesco, that would be amazing.
Don't worry, some novels, some
Okay.
novels, some books. It's okay.
Amazing books. And the first European solar punk novel, the, all
I,
right, let me
I
read from here.
camminatori, I camminatori, the roamers. Don't worry.
Okay, the Romers. Um, His works have been translated into many languages and published in the USA, the UK, China, Brazil, Italy, France, and India. He also works as an editor and publisher of Future Fiction, a multicultural project dedicated to scouting and publishing the best world science fiction in translation from more than 40 countries and 14 languages, with a mission to decolonize the future. From
Yeah,
2019, he's the honorary director of the Fishing Fortress Science Fiction Academy of Chongqing. Apologies for the bad pronunciation, where he runs the Future Fiction Writing Workshop. He may be found at www.futurefiction.org. So, welcome, uh, Francesco.
thank you. Thank you very much. Uh,
Great.
okay, so
Please go.
it's really I'll start, okay? Yes, okay. So it's really a pleasure to be part of the Ananke Festival. And thanks again, Sabine, for the kind invitation. I will try to give my contribution in terms of the future. I've been working in science fiction and dealing with the shape of the things to come, to quote a famous book by H.G. Wells. And so I will start my presentation so you can see. This is the title is called The Sense of Wonder. I will explain what it is about. And the subtitle is pretty much self-explaining, is a tool to preserve the biodiversity of the future. A little bit about myself, as have been already kind of summarized. These are some of the covers of the novels and anthologies and works that I've been working on, spreading from Italy to the UK to India to China. My work is being published in many countries, and I'm trying also to work as a kind of hub and networking different authors, and I'll show you more about that later. So the first question is, does the future still exist? The idea is that much of what we know about the future is something that the present is, kind of eating in the sense that we saw an accelerating movement, an accelerating phenomenon that the future is always more present into our daily life. But there is something interesting if we look, for example, at this pyramid of technology that I took from the work of Next Nature, which is a magazine of a number of Dutch futurists. So technology, if you realize, is something that has this shape. It can have seven different steps. It goes from being envisioned to become operational, like the lab-grown meat. Then it becomes applied. It gets out of the factory and gets into our houses, like the breast implants or chemotherapy. Then it's accepted, goes to a higher level, becomes a part of our daily life, like the light bulbs or the solar cells. Then it becomes vital. Technology is something we cannot do without, like internet or the glasses. And then at the higher stages, technology becomes something invisible, like money, computers, antibiotics. And the highest level, technology becomes a second nature, something that is indistinguishable from nature, like agriculture, for example, or writing, which we consider a technology, well, but we consider it also totally natural. There is something interesting that happens when we introduce time, because technologies rise and develop. And on the right part of the slide, you will see that there are technology that are falling and decaying. They become old and obsolete, like the steam engine, like the horse and carriage. Like, so there is this idea that technologies that are emerging in the left part of the pyramid are still posing questions, are still creating doubts because they deal with something unknown. Many times I ask students or people, would you eat a 3D printed hamburger? And many of the people would say, yes, I would, I will try. And some other people would say, no, no, you go first. I don't want to try a 3D printed hamburger. That's because science fiction works, creating very interesting dilemmas and new dramas related to new technologies. So in that part of the pyramid is where fear meets wonder. And that is exactly the kind of dilemma that very good narrative poses onto the readers so that they are confronted with difficult choices. Um, so my definition of science fiction is really what makes reality obsolete from a technological, but also from a sociological or a political point of view. And I'll give you a very clear example. Imagine, for example, that um, that two people are making love, and this brings some days later a woman to take an anti-pregnancy pill. Okay, so imagine that this scene is written in a book in the 18th century. The pill is a magic pill. It's something incomprehensible, something that is completely out of the present of the possibilities. Imagine the same scene written in a book in 1960, where the pill is first introduced. Well, this pill becomes very controversial, very thought-provoking, because it can completely change the demography of families and nations, because it gives women the choice and the possibility to do something that was impossible before. And now imagine this same story written today, when the anti-pregnancy pill is a sort of right, so that women have this right to decide is not questionable in many parts of the world. So the parable of the pill is very, for me, clear to represent the the way society evolves and develops in order to introduce new rights, new possibilities through technology, and changing and shaping our civilization in a better way, giving more rights, more protection, more choices to people that didn't have it before. So another important element is the fact that we tend to represent the future from a Western point of view. This picture is a beautiful infographic made by the artist Ward Shelley. You can see his website below. And it represents, in one single glance, the whole history of Western civilization. I will not go into that because that's not important for the the topic in we're talking about. But just briefly, science fiction was born with questioning reality, and so it is connected to um, legends, myth, where people were gathering and trying to answer the question, where does the lightning come from? Why does the earthquake happens? And as soon as science developed, especially during the Enlightenment years in France and in Italy, in the UK, and many other countries in the West, these kind of narratives started to use logic, reasoning to tell stories. And then it developed into the golden age of science fiction. It went into new wave and cyberpunk and all the things. But this is not important. The important thing is that this picture was printed and put on the very big wall at the entrance of the Chengdu Science Fiction Convention in China in 2017 when I went there for the first time. And I asked my friends in China, why did you print this picture? This is the history of the Western science fiction. And they didn't have an answer. But 6 months later, they came up with this infographic, which represents the history of Chinese science fiction. Again, I will not go into the history, but it's important to understand that the future doesn't have one single voice, and the future doesn't come from one single country. There are many futures, there are multiple visions, and they all have a right to tell their own stories from their own point of view. So this is what was really important to demonstrate and to show that science fiction happens in many countries, and there is not just one single source of the future, which is very important for our narrative. Because the idea is that the future is already here, but is not evenly distributed. This is what William Gibson said some years ago. Of course, that was correct at that time, around 20 years ago, because there is a global digital divide, or there is, of course, a problem of availability of technologies. So it was true what William Gibson said, but 20 years later, another important science fiction author called Ian McDonald said that different cultures do different things with the same technology, because with globalization, when an iPhone or another device, a laptop or another technology comes out, is exactly the same technology from Kolkata to Rio de Janeiro to Los Angeles. But what changes? It changes that one thing is to have 5G in Tokyo, and one thing is to have 25K in La Pampa, Argentina. So according to the local conditions, to the local cultures, to the specific conditions of the infrastructure, people change, bend, modify, adapt the technology to their local needs. And there is a beautiful word in Hindi that I think captures exactly this phenomenon, which is called jugaad. And jugaad is the ability to make do with what you have and use frugal creativity in order to fix, to adapt, to change the technology according to your needs and fixing and solving your local problems. And so the second question is, what's the shape of the future? Which is connected in a way to the jugaad, because we are used to think that technology is something shiny, modern, up to date, cutting edge stuff, but it's also something that it needs to solve some practical issues. And so here I take some funny, maybe some funny pictures representing how technologies can be adapted, can be in a way localized and turned into something that is culturally specific. I like to mention the teacher at the below. She is during the pandemic using her phone and transmitting to her students that were at home during the pandemic in order to keep on teaching. That's resilience. That's a wonderful use of technology during hard times. That's what I call, necessity is the mother um, uh, of invention. And the same goes for other sort of technologies that we might think are a kind of, underdeveloped, or not the proper thing when it comes to, Western views. But let me show you something more. These are, for example, science fiction architecture, something that we saw in Western movies with their shiny outlines and all the incredible architecture, the ziggurats, the lights, the neon, and all the things that represent the idea of the future. But let me show you this. This is vernacular architecture. This is architecture without the famous architects. And don't they look very much the same? But one thing is considered developed and the other is considered underdeveloped. So the question here is, who decides what is modern and who decides what is contemporary and most of all sustainable? um, Another striking thing, when I went to visit some friends in Peru, they show me these amazing technologies called kipu. And the kipu is a sort of web of knots that were used by the kipu kamayok, which is the scientist, in a way, the specialist that had the mysterious knowledge to interpret the meaning of these knots. These knots were used to count series. For example, when was the last time that there was an earthquake? When was the last time that there was a flood? Or where were put the deposits of grain and other cereals? So this, in a way, is a sort of computer. I think is a sort of computer, and the Kipu Kamayok is an IT specialist that can interpret these messages. So one thing is, very old and ancient. The other is modern, but they do the same thing. And the same goes for aesthetics. If you remember famous Princess Leia, her hairdo, her style comes very much from Clara de la Rocha, which is a Mexican revolutionary, and the Opi women from the Indian in the U.S. So let's say that the West is a kind of appropriating these things and turning them into very cool aesthetics, but they come from other cultures and from the global South very often. So the thing is, there is one world, but many future ways. I like to believe that the future is not one, and we are talk about multiple futures in plural, uh, with different approaches that is really capturing the diversity of um, the the cultures, the populations, and the way the technology is used and applied in many different countries. There's also one thing that I've discovered lately that is also related to time. Time was measured and used in many different ways. There are many different ways of counting times, including the season, the years, and stuff. But after um, the Washington Conference in the 19th century, time was standardized and uniformed and made uniform. So again, is a kind of top-down approach that says what is time and what should be the world definition of time. And this is also a way of trying to, make people uniform, make them the same, while in reality, they are very different. So the third question is, who is telling the future? Well, uh, there is a very big problem in science fiction, but I think that this problem expands into many other industries and sectors. The problem is that as I am speaking English, although I am Italian, English has become the lingua franca of our time. That means that all the narratives, many of the narratives that we have been grown up, that we consume, that we can share across multiple countries are coming from the US and the UK. That, of course, is due to the spreading of English thanks to the technology. I will show you more about that. And that means that over the last 80 years, there has been a translation flow of books, of movies, of games, and of imagination that goes from the US to the rest of the world. And on the other side, the rest of the world has paid copyright fees, has paid royalties, and has been trained people and developing jobs and skill on this sort of framework, on this sort of culture, on this sort of infrastructure. The consequences is that there are easy and fast translation from English into all the other languages. When Game of Thrones or Harry Potter comes out, there is immediately a 30 or 40 languages translation, but nothing gets in. That means that there is a black hole of cultural loss because a study from the Rochester University said that just 3% of what is published in the US comes from a translation. And in those translations are included all the languages of the world. So that's the openness of the US market. That means that uh, everything gets out and nothing gets in. And that is a wide hole. On the other side, the whole world and the other languages is a black hole because everything gets in and nothing gets out. So no translations. It's very hard for an Italian, for a French, or for someone that speaks Chinese to have their books and their stories translated into English. And that's because technology is not neutral. If you take the distribution of languages across the world in the real world, you see these pictures by number of speakers versus Chinese, then is English, then Spanish, then Hindi, Bengali, French, Arabic. But when you start to use technology, namely, for example, internet, the worldwide content becomes completely dominated by one single language. And that, of course, affects the perception of reality. So technology modifies and changes the perception that we have of the real world. And so that is that is what motivated me to create this concept of sense of wonder. That means going around the world to find neglected stories, invisible authors that because they do not write in English, they are completely forgotten, ignored, made irrelevant, marginalized. And the fact is that they are very big and important authors and they deserve to be heard. And so this tool that I call sense of wonder, from wondering, because in science fiction we have a very important fundament that is called sense of wonder with O, meaning being amazed by something that it could be terrible, like a dystopia, or it could be wonderful, like an utopia. So this sense of wonder, I turned it into a sense of wonder. Um, and it's also a bit political because this sense of wonder, I developed it into a matrix, meaning that there are forces that go against the diversity of the future and forces that work in favor of the diversity of the future. I will not go into each and every one of them, but I would like just to mention the power of language because I deal with words as a writer. So when someone from the West um, goes to live in another country, they're called expatriates. But when someone from the global South goes to live in another country, they're called the diaspora. So we use two different words for the same thing, depending on the identity of who is traveling. I think that's weird. I think that's really it highlights a kind of different treatments because we need different words for different people. That's the idea, even though we are still talking about people, right? Um, so this is the kind of work that I did together with a team of translators and editors, we have been working for the biodiversity of the future. As there are many countries, there are many futures, and on future fiction, we want to depict them all. And this is the kind of distribution of stories that we have been working on over the last 10 years. We have shown that science fiction happens everywhere, that excellent stories about innovation, technology, or, in general, tomorrows are happening everywhere. So there is not this idea that the future happens just in the West or in the US or the UK. So the sense of wonder is a sense of wonder in this kind of declination. And over the last 10 years, we published books in Italian and in English from Africa, from Russia, from Greece, Spain, Israel, Turkey, Germany, Cuba, really showing that things can be done differently from India, from the subcontinent, from Botswana, Latin America, Germany, China, France, the Netherlands, because there are wonderful stories telling their own future from their own point of view in many of these, in all the countries, basically. And and one of the things we also did is preserving the original language, because there is a risk that the languages will disappear in some years, maybe. But maybe AI is changing the picture here. So hopefully AI will be used in a good way. That's what I'm working on, and I'm not just hoping for, but really working on that. And so we have many of these books that have been published in dual language, Chinese and Italian, Chinese and English, English and Italian, and so on. Um, this is again other covers of other books. We did a lot of books, so this is basically our catalog of stories. We have more than 80 books. And a big part of this catalog is represented by Chinese science fiction, because China at the moment is really changing the landscape of science fiction, because they kind of live in the future. They are now the most advanced country, and they are sort of implementing a mass experiment of how to use this technology on a population of a 1,500,000,000 people. So um, that 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 is incredible. I've been lucky to visit China 11 times in 7 years, and I saw how the vehicles are now completely electric now. The money disappeared in favor of electronic transactions, and there are automated vehicles that are going in the cities. They are delivering stuff with drones. It's incredible, really. If you want to see a preview of the future, you should definitely go to China. But that's not just one. There's not just that. There's of course more, and it's interesting to see how, especially from the global South, a number of narratives are coming to decolonize these sort of imagination that have been occupied by 80 years of narratives coming from the US and the UK. So these are books that we did, especially in English, because there's not much. Because when you try to propose a story in English, the cost, the burden of the translation is on you. They will not consider in many, many, many occasions the translation costs into the budget. So if you go to a number of magazines or publishers at the submission guidelines page, you will find that they say, yes, we welcome marginalized communities, we welcome um, stories from across the world, but hey, the story must be provided in English. So that is an obstacle That is a barrier. Now that these days we're talking about barriers that is imposed onto all the other markets. While on the other side, we read English in the original language, and we never ask for the US and the UK publisher to send us their stories in our language. So this is one of the latest post that I did. I kind of said that from this time, given the idea of reciprocity that want to be uh, introduced in the markets, we should receive the proposals in our local language. And I hope that my colleagues from Germany, from France, from Spain, from the Arab countries, from many languages in India, from Japan and China, they would say, okay, you want to send us your book? Yes, please send us in Chinese, send us in Arabic, send us in French, Portuguese, German. That would be equal. That would be fair, considering the amount of money that went from all the countries to the US and the UK market. And so the latest books that we did in English are these: Arab science fiction and Ecoceanic. It's about stories coming from about climate change and coming from many countries of the global south that I've edited together with Tarun Saint. That's also an important thing. I work with local editors in order to have a cooperation. Arabilius, I did it with Cristina Jurado. She's a Spanish editor, but living in the Emirates, in Dubai, I think. So this is the right way to create cooperation and collaboration across multiple countries so that we can discover these very good stories and voices. And lately, we started to do the same thing for comics because these books are being set in many different scenarios, many different landscapes and culture. So we wanted to show also these places. We wanted to show the different aesthetics, the different, the culture that emerge from different parts of the world. And I think it's interesting. Also, this idea of developing cross-media products. So basically, this is what I'm trying to work on, develop a sense of wonder, which is a tool to decolonize the future and show that technologies, innovation are spreading and are coming, emerging from many different parts of the world. There is not just a Silicon Valley, but there is Bangalore, there is Shenzhen, there is Lagos, there is Sao Paulo. They are all big hubs of technology that are being developed in many parts of the world. And as I have published many of these stories, I can fairly say there are futurism emerging from many parts of the world, like Sino-futurism, Indo-futurism, Gulf futurism, Afro-futurism, and Andean futurism. We might not be very familiar with many of them, but they exist and they deserve to be heard. So this is it. And I'll leave you with a small joke. When are you going to stop wasting your time with that science fiction nonsense and start dealing with reality? So thank you very much. This is it.
Thank you so much, Francesco. I think this should be our reality.
It is, in a way. I'm working, trying to make it a reality.
Yeah. While you were, first of all, what an amazing presentation. I learned so much today. So thank you so much for that. And, I was just thinking in the beginning, you were talking about, the parable of the pill.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of Dr. Faustus. Uh, you know, we consider him as a magician, but to be very honest, he was a scientist.
Yes, there is a lot of technology in a pill. and a lot of chemistry, a lot of biology, so a lot of knowledge, a lot of wisdom. And that captures exactly this parable of how the technology goes from being magic to be civil right.
And which makes Christopher Marlowe, the author, the writer, a science fiction writer as well.
Also,
so and even a lot of books of old, we tend to think they have a lot to do with mythology, but now that you think about it, so they can be included in the science fiction genre.
oh,
Would you say that?
let's say it
Specu
depends.
Yeah,
Of course,
yeah,
speculative fiction, yes,
yeah,
because when the concept is used in a metaphorical and or allegorical way, then you are into the fantastic literature.
yeah,
Okay?
yeah,
But when there is the tentative, then when they are trying to explain why this could happen, when the technology is plausible in a way, then it's science fiction. So let's say it is about the idea that the magician has the magic formula for himself, and most of the population cannot use it. So it's a sort of esoteric knowledge that is in his own hands. You have to be a wizard
yeah,
to use it. On the other side, technology is replicable. That means that the scientist gives the technology to all the people in the perfect world. Okay.
yeah,
Sometimes they
yeah,
put
yeah, yeah.
copyright on that, but in yes, that's the problem. But the scientific research should be tested, replicable, and that means that I can do it, you can do it, my neighbor can do it. That is the difference. It's
Yeah.
democratic. It's not kept in the hands of one single person like the magic formula.
Thank you so much. This has been an amazing session. Thank you so much, Francesco, for doing this for us. And I'm looking forward to our other conversation, which I know would be equally, interesting and engaging.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much.